In September of last year, the film adaptation of Stephen King's novel The Long Walk hit theaters. It's about a group of young men that are selected to participate in a walking competition to the death. The winners granted unimaginable wealth and a wish for anything. It's bleak, dystopian, and heart-wrenching for all the reasons you'd imagine, but the heart of the film, the relationship between Ray Garrity and Pete McBreeze, revolves around a devastating circumstance. What do you do when you find and lose your person, all in the span of 5 days? A 19-year-old Stephen King wrote The Long Walk sometime around 1966, 1967, and it's long been considered to be a metaphor for the Vietnam War, though King says that wasn't necessarily what he set out to write. He said, "You write from your time, so certainly that was in my mind, but I never thought about it consciously. I was writing a kind of brutal thing. It was hopeless and just what you write when you're 19 years old, man. You're full of beans and you're full of cynicism, and that's the way it was." The book consists of a 100-person ensemble, but the protagonist is Ray Garrity, a 16-year-old from Maine, the home walker. Upon starting the walk, he meets Peter McBreeze, who he calls Pete. Pete's 16 or 17, it's never really specified in the book, and they become fast friends. In fact, on page 7, they're described as unconsciously drawing together when they first interact, and well, that's all, folks. That one phrase is sort of the crux of their entire relationship. As the walk progresses, they develop this really deep, complex bond that acts as the emotional core of the story. As the boys around them succumb to the walk, they find comfort in each other. The same is true of their relationship in the film. No book-to-film adaptation is going to be one-to-one, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that the movie is quite different than its source material, but the way that it differs is pretty radical. There are small things like the fact that Ray, played by an incredibly endearing Cooper Hoffman, is aged up to 18, and Pete, played by a very magnetic David Johnson, is somewhere between 19 and 22. Literally nobody knows. The little wiki page says 24, but I just don't think that's true. But the age range in the novel is 13 to 18, so I'm assuming that the age range in the movie follows a similar guideline, and the walkers range from 18 to 22 or 23. This change contributes more to the allegory for war, with the minimum age for being drafted to serve in the military having been 18 and the maximum age being 25. There's also the detail that the book's 100 walkers have been cut in half for the film, with each walker representing a U.S. state. So Pete's number is changed from 61 in the book to 23. And then lastly, there's a change that Stephen King specifically demanded, being that the 4-mile-per-hour walking speed in the book be reduced to 3 miles per hour for the movie. Like I said, small, but no less important changes. The big changes lie in the characterizations of both Ray and Pete, and the ending, which I'll talk about at the end. In the novel, Ray joins the walk for some reason unbeknownst to both himself and the audience. In fact, he finds motivation in his girlfriend Jan after Pete finds his in outlasting a fellow walker named Barkovich. It's a complete 180 from movie Ray, who's driven by his need to enact revenge on the Major, the man who killed his father and acts as the antagonist of the story. In the source material, Ray's father is still outspoken against the government, much like in the movie, but instead of being killed, he's squatted, meaning imprisoned, and Ray feels a certain sort of animosity towards him for not keeping his politics to himself. I'll talk more about it as I move through this video, but The Long Walk, just by its nature of being a novel, is a very internal exercise in characterization. We learn nearly everything about Ray's life through his thoughts and crucial aspects of who he is through memories. The movie, by comparison, is literally just action and dialogue, so what we learn about him and how is substantially different. With that in mind, I need to state this very plainly for the sake of this video. In the book, there isn't a question of if Ray Garrity is experiencing a crisis of sexuality. He is, and we figure that out through various memories, much introspection, and very specific interactions. In the movie, however, that question is, well, it's a question. It's hazier, it's a little more subtle, but aspects of the book's crisis are still very much there. And that's why I'm making this video. The discussion about Pete's changes will happen later because there's a lot to get into, so you can look at the bookmarks if you're interested in that, or you can just enjoy the ride until I get there. Okay. As we can see... I can't even get this out without laughing because I did not stay true to what I wrote. As I was writing, I tried to structure this in a way that would prevent it from sprawling. But here we are. That said, there is some sort of order here. I have 4 main scenes from the movie that I'll be analyzing alongside the book and the script because they're all quite different from each other, and I think it's interesting looking at how we went from book to script to screen. And because it's interesting seeing how the casting and directing lends itself to the words on the page. I'll be following the movie, so when I talk about little things that lead up to the 4 main scenes for context, they're film accurate, not book accurate. Miscellaneous thoughts will be at the very end. Also, before we begin, I made a really large spreadsheet that marks basically every single interaction between Pete McBreeze and Ray Garrity, just so I can keep track of what I was talking about and see how their relationship differentiated from like the novel, the script, and the movie. That AI could never do what I'm doing. This is hard work and dedication. If you want to look at it, I put it in the description. It's for myself. I made it for me, so it's kind of everywhere. But if you're curious, hey, feel free to take a peek into my brain. Okay, cool. On to the video. As I mentioned before, Pete and Ray become fast friends. They click pretty immediately, and in the book, we learn early on that Peter McVries has a penchant for teasing, or arguably, depending on how you see it, flirting with Ray. He winks at him, blows kisses, calls him endearments, all of which sort of leave Ray dumbfounded, which, bless his heart. Anyways, they hit it off and walk for a while. Not before long, a walker named Curly starts cramping up and struggling to walk. In the film, Ray helps Curly out by physically grabbing onto him and encouraging him along, with Pete and Art joining in. It's a powerful moment that shows us who Ray Garrity is as a person. He's empathic, and he's willing to put his own life at risk if it means helping someone else. In the book, though, when Curly's on the precipice of death, Ray's fascinated by his pain. He even feels disappointed when Curly's Charlie horse lets up and he doesn't immediately get his ticket. It illuminates how disparate the two versions of Ray are, but I don't think that makes one more or less interesting to examine. After Curly's killed, Ray's so shocked by the brutality and realization of what's actually going to happen to all but one of them that he gets a warning. Pete runs back to pull him along, and we start to see the dynamic that'll form over the course of the movie. A little while later, when Ray asks for his first canteen to be filled, he reaches out to touch the carbine of the soldier. It's foreshadowing, but it's also a book canon moment, and when Pete notices and asks about it, Ray says that it's for luck. In response, Pete calls Ray a dear boy. It's not lingered on in the movie for real, but in the novel, Pete says it and then he hauls ass, which is so, okay. They continue walking, and eventually Pete asks Ray if he's getting tired. Ray says that he's been tired, and we get the establishment of a reoccurring motif. Moments. Pete tells Ray that they can get through the walk not by thinking of the end, but thinking about the next moment. Which, just to remind everyone, only one of these people can make it. There's no reality in which they both get through the walk, but the way that Pete phrases it makes one think that there might be hope for something else. Crazy. Pete pulls out this lyrical little line.
Hey, just go on dancing with me like this forever, compadre, and I'll never tire. Hey, we'll scrape our shoes on the stars and hang upside down from the moon.
And it's really sweet and fun, and nothing can go wrong here, right? In the book, McVries blows Ray a kiss after he says the moon and the stars line, and then you guessed it, he hauls ass. What I'm about to say is going to sound really obvious because the entire movie is like this, but this scene in particular was when I felt the absolutely immaculate chemistry between Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson. Chemistry so good that y'all are doing another movie together less than a year after your first collaboration came out. Exactly. I'm going to need 20 more ASAP. I'm going to need one every year. Thank you. As the walk progresses, Pete forms the Musketeers, which consists of him, Ray, Hank Olson, and Art Baker. They all become fast friends and help each other out in various ways throughout the walk. We also get this moment from the one and only Peter McVries.
You know, if I ever get out of this, I'm gonna fornicate till my cock turns blue.
Okay.
Well, I've never been so horny in my life as I am right this minute. Ain't that strange?
It is fucking strange.
Yeah, just a little bit, right?
Uh-huh.
Hey, I can even get horny for you, Ray.
Oh.
For you to smell like
hey,
my
yeah.
mom's
Give me a
asshole.
fucking,
Oh
get my ticket,
God,
my
that
man.
smells so good.
Yeah, right.
This is a book accurate moment, and do I consider this to be a 19-year-old Stephen Kingism more than something to endlessly analyze? Yeah, but am I factoring it into the consideration of queerness? Look at the material. How could I not? Sometime after that, we approach the first night of the walk, and it brings us Pete noticing things about Ray, and it carries us into our first big scene. There's a lot about this scene to unpack. The first of which being the context in which it occurs in the book, which is so silly because this actually doesn't occur in the book at all. When Ray starts dozing off in the novel, he dreams about his mother's lullaby and how much he loves her. There's a really interesting thing here with Ray and his mother and how he perceives women in general, because here he talks about wanting to kiss her and be in love with her for always, speaking about his mother, before his mind drifts to his girlfriend Jan. There's a fantastic video that talks about this better than I ever could, and you should 100% go watch it if you want more of an analysis on it. But yeah, Ray thinks about his mom and wanting her before her face is replaced by his girlfriend, Jan's. He thinks briefly about Jan before her face is replaced by Jimmy Owens, a boy that lived down the block from Ray when he was younger. Ray's mind drifts to a memory. When he and Jimmy were 5, they were playing doctor's office and taking their clothes off and touching each other and becoming excited by it before being caught by Jimmy's mother. Jimmy's mother told Ray's mother, who in turn sat him down and asked him how he would like it if she made him go out and walk down the street with no clothes on. 5-year-old Ray cried and begged her not to make him walk down the street naked and to not tell his father. A little later on in the dream, Ray recalls how he and Jimmy, now age 7, were talking about naked women and how they looked down there. Jimmy told Ray that they were hairy and cut open, and Ray refused to believe Jimmy because what Jimmy said was disgusting. A year after that, Ray accidentally hit Jimmy in the mouth with an air rifle as they were playing guns, and Jimmy had to get stitches. The dream ends with Ray recalling Jimmy and his family moving away, and he wakes up with Pete elbowing him in the side and getting a warning. It's a monster of a dream to unpack. From the top down, I understand it as us diving into Ray's psyche. We start with the familial. Ray thinks about his mother, about the comfort he derives from thinking about her and her lullabies. There's a huge Freudian connotation around Ray and his mother and women as a whole, like I said. Like, in the book, Ray's mom has no name. In the movie, she's known as Jenny, and this is solely because screenwriter J.T. Mulder named her after his own mom, which is, oh, that's nice. She's seen as a symbol of maternity and domesticity, and the Freudian aspects that Stephen King introduces when Ray mentions his mother, I think, stem from his father's absence and him having to step into the role as man of the house at the age of, 5. But that's a lot for another time. From there, we move to the romantic. Ray thinks of marriage and love before his mind moves to Jan. He thinks about her for all of 2 sentences before moving on to sexuality. After thinking of Jan, he thinks of the most repressed, shameful aspect of his life, something that he was threatened by his mother for, something that he begged his mother not to tell his father about. He thinks about Jimmy and the stuff that they did together as kids. He thinks about the fact that he finds how women look down there disgusting. And I should point out that when Ray asserts his disgust as a child, he never amends it in his current state as a 16-year-old with a girlfriend. It leads me to believe that he might still be disgusted, especially since the only time he ever did see a naked woman was when it was his mother, who he saw on accident. And since he turned down Jan's proposition for them to have sex if he backed out of the walk. So from this dream, we start to understand what the physical action of walking means to Ray Garrity. It's a direct confrontation of his sexuality and masculinity. In fact, there's another memory later on where Ray recalls getting water cramps when he was younger and helping a neighbor haul hay. He was sent home and he said that he felt like a boy who had flunked one of his manhood tests. He walked home and the sun had beaten down on the back of his sunburned neck like a 10-pound hammer. So, in a very real way, in the same way that young men would enlist in the military in order to prove themselves, Ray joined this walk to prove something to himself. It wasn't until he started walking that he starts to seriously consider what that something is. But okay, back to how it ties into this scene. In the book, after Pete wakes Ray up, Ray ponders his dream for a little bit before readjusting his jacket and slowing down so much while he does it that he gets his second warning. He doesn't get a third, though there is a hill that he struggles to get up, and Pete's like, dude, pour your canteen over your head, and he gets over it fine. That's the extent of it. Now, in the movie, it's very different. Ray dozes off and he dreams about his mother singing a lullaby. He gets a warning, Pete wakes him up, and they have a little back and forth about Ray's mom. Pete asks about her, Ray talks about her, gives her name, and actually grants her some autonomy that she lacks in the book, and he talks about how much he misses her. Pete asks Ray if he has a girl, and the following exchange transpires.
Yeah, I did. I had to end it because of this, so that was that.
33.
That's too bad, but smart.
Second.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about you, Pete? You got a lady?
No, Ray. No, I don't.
Warning. 47. Second warning.
My genuine reaction to that scene. Right. I kid you not. My eyebrow shot to my forehead and I had to hit one of these because, what? This was the moment that A, solidified the fact that I was making this video, and B, made me want to read the script because I kept going over it in my head. And I was like, okay, so this has to be a written moment. Surely this isn't an acting choice. This isn't a directing choice. This isn't anything that would be unscripted because there's a whole sequence that builds up to one of the most tense moments. So him getting a warning during this time would be scripted. Duh. So let's take a look at the script, shall we? Blah, 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 blah. Dream. Blah, 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 blah. Jenny's lullaby. The one difference between the dream and the movie and the script is that Ray's father isn't in the movie dream. Other than that, they're the same. Alright, Pete wakes him up, they talk about his mom, the guys goof off a little, which, side note, I love this ensemble and the natural chemistry that everybody seems to have. Harkness's little
Stop talking about people's mom.
Thank you, Harkness.
is very near and dear to my heart. And then we get to Pete asking about Ray's girl and that whole explanation. Okay, cool. Then we get to Ray asking Pete the same question, and we're hit with this. Pete says no with an indecipherable grin. Right. So I'm clearly anticipating the whole Ray looking dazed and love struck and slowing down so much that he gets his second warning, but instead we're hit with this. Ray gets his second warning from taking his jacket off. I had to take a second. I literally re-downloaded the script because I thought I was missing something. So, the slowing down bit isn't in the script, and I'm very normal about it, obviously. Seriously though, somebody from Lionsgate, please contact me. Francis Lawrence, JT Mulner, Cooper Hoffman, David Johnson. Somebody please call me because I need to talk about this. The reason that I am very passionate about this scene is because this is the moment that I could see that they were actively doing something with the sexuality crisis that Ray goes through in the book. We might not be able to see his memories with Jimmy, but we can damn sure see the fact that whatever he feels for Pete is a matter of life or death, because he literally gets closer to death at the realization that Pete might be like him, or maybe he's like Pete. It's such a tiny, nuanced, and thoughtful detail, and I found it absolutely astounding that they managed to convey Ray's predicament in such a subtle way. Y'all come get y'all's GLAAD awards. And I should mention that the script that's available to us, the public, may very well not be the final shooting script. JT Mulner said that he was altering the script throughout production because of how collaborative the process of building the script was. The actors also said that Francis Lawrence, the director, gave them a lot of space to flesh their characters out. So, keep that in mind. That aside, this is still insane. To me, this all lends directly to what happens when Ray blows up at Pete. After Ray slows down, Barkovich says this.
Uh-oh. You dreaming about your boyfriend's dick in your mouth?
And Ray trips, and he gets his third warning. Pete tries to help him up, but Ray snaps at him and accuses Pete of wanting him dead. This reaction, in my opinion, is caused by Ray's realization. This is him becoming unraveled at the prospect of getting into a real pickle. Ray has no Jimmy Owens in this version of The Long Walk, at least not that we know of, but he does have a Pete McVries, and he's actively awakened something that I don't think Ray can fully comprehend. So, instead of contending with it, after he's humiliated by Barkovich, he takes it out on Pete. And afterwards, when Ray has his panic attack while profusely apologizing to Pete after Pete saves his life again, that's a movie-specific moment. It doesn't exist in the book. The closest thing that I can parallel it to in the book is when Ray starts becoming a bit hysterical as they get closer to seeing his mom and his girlfriend in Freeport, and he tries and fails to spill his guts about what happened between him and Jimmy to Pete. But that was a lot. But that scene is tied up to another huge one that I'll go into depth about shortly. So, very different subjects of conversation, but the emotion dredged up in both scenes are tethered to Ray's confrontation of his feelings. After night passes, we get Pete opening up a bit. When Ray asks for Pete to keep him from fading, Pete confides in Ray that he doesn't think he'll win the walk because there's something in the brain that he doesn't have to do that with.
Brain, Daddy. Not man or God, there's something in the fucking brain. I don't have that. I don't want to beat people that badly.
Now, this scene is almost word for word from the book, except because of how Pete's backstory is changed, the reasoning is a bit different. In the film, Pete says that he doesn't think that he'll win because he doesn't want to beat people that bad, though I personally believe that he could. Book Pete, on the other hand, says that he simply doesn't think that he has the mental fortitude to keep going. It's not about beating people for him, it's about how far he believes his mind can go. All of that's wrapped up in his reasoning for walking though, which I'll get to when I talk about Freeport. After a rough morning where Olsen was going through it and Harkness is killed, the guys share their wishes with each other. Pete reveals that he has a new wish, for there to be 2 winners instead of 1, so that
People can have hope that maybe their friends just might make it.
we see Ray's reaction to this, and this is a massive change from the book for 2 reasons. The first of which being that Pete, much like Ray in the novel, doesn't set out on the walk with a wish in mind. In fact, he says, I have no idea what I'll do if I win this. There's nothing that I really need. I mean, I don't have a sick mother sitting at home or a father on a kidney machine or anything. I don't even have a little brother dying gamely of leukemia. So for this version of Pete to now not only have a wish, but to tailor that wish around his and Ray's newfound relationship is pretty profound. Ray keeps his wish a secret, but says that it might enact change, which leads to everyone yelling,
Fuck the long walk! Hell yeah, Carter! Fuck the major!
It's a brief moment of resistance, well, a symbol of it, at least. And it carries us into our next big scene. Like I said at the beginning of this video, Film Ray's wish is to ask for a carbine to kill the Major with after revealing that the Major killed his father. It's a wish that's created specifically for the film, and I think it's one that worked really well, especially since it leads to a split in ideologies between him and Pete. Though Ray has no wish in the book, a big bulk of the conversation that's had in this scene is directly lifted from the page. Around midway through the novel, Ray sees a family watching them walk and feels a deep sense of disgust towards him. He calls them a fucking bunch of pigs for sitting down and watching the walk. Pete pushes back and argues that if he wasn't walking, Ray would be doing the exact same thing. And then that leads to a split in ideologies between them. Here, the main thing that sets the book and movie apart is, aside from Ray having a wish, Pete's outlook on life. Sure, both versions contain a split in ideologies, but the purposes of that split differ greatly and impact the relationship in completely different ways. In the novel, Ray complains about the family watching them walk and says that they're animals. They want to see someone's brains on the road. That's why they turn out. They just as soon see yours. Pete counters him, and the following transpires. That isn't the point, McVree said calmly. Didn't you say you went to see the long walk when you were younger? Yes, when I didn't know any better. Well, that makes it okay, doesn't it? McVree's uttered a short, ugly-sounding laugh. Sure, they're animals. You think you just found out a new principle? Sometimes I wonder just how naive you really are. The French lords and ladies used to screw each other after the guillotinings. The old Romans used to stuff each other during the gladiatorial matches. That's entertainment, Garrity. It's nothing new. He laughed again. Garrity stared at him, fascinated. Death is great for the appetites, McVree said. It doesn't matter if they're eating or drinking or sitting on their cans. They like it better, they feel it and taste it better because they're watching dead men. But that's not even the real point of this little expedition, Garrity. The point is, they're the smart ones. They're not getting thrown to the lions. They're not staggering along and hoping that they won't have to take a shit with 2 warnings against them. You're dumb, Garrity. You and me and Pearson and Barkovich and Stebbins, we're all dumb. They're animals, all right, but why are you so goddamn sure that makes us human beings? Then why are you doing it? Garrity asked him. If you know that much and if you're that sure, why are you doing it? The same reason we're all doing it, Stebbins said. We want to die. That's why we're doing it. Why else, Garrity? Why else? The tone here is decidedly darker than the one that we get in the movie. Pete's reasoning is nihilistic and somber. He doesn't see any good that could come out of the long walk, and the only reason he defends that family is to remind Ray that they're all fish swimming in the same tank. Stebbins' explicit mention of everyone on the long walk being suicidal to some degree is what puts things into more perspective, and it's a thing that's definitely missing from the movie. But also, Stebbins is quite different in the movie than he is in the novel, much like Ray and Pete are, but that's a whole nother thing. It's bleak. It's the totalitarian state that the walk is set in, boiled down to its essential parts. Watcher and walker. There's no hope in a world like this, and don't expect to find it in these teenage boys who are days away from dying. This is decidedly different in the film. This clash of ideals is thrust into the context of a whole bunch of other stuff, mainly Ray's desire to kill the Major, and I actually love this whole scene because it's the first time that we get to see opposition from these two from a philosophical point of view. After Ray reveals that he wants to kill the Major, Pete says that killing a man is only easy for a certain type of person, in which Ray says that he'll become that type of person. Pete replies that he'd be sad to see that because those people can't see the beauty in the world. After Ray questions what beauty there is in the world, Pete says this.
Sky, the trees, the birds, fuck, man, everything. You know what else is beautiful? Us. Because we're real friends, aren't we?
He implores Ray to understand that every moment they spend alive matters, but Ray's stubborn and defiant and says that what he's trying to do is bigger than himself and his mom and that he has to kill the Major. The only section of this scene that overlaps with the novel is when Ray spots a family watching them walk and expresses his disgust at them being there. He says that they're animals who want to see someone's brains on the road and would just as soon see Pete's, but McVree sees differently. He sees a family that loves each other and that have been conditioned to live the same life that they have, 2 sides of the same coin. He goes on to say that Ray's wish means nothing if he doesn't believe that family's worth saving because vengeance isn't enough. A rainbow appears and they look at it, a symbol of hope amongst the gray. Pete asks Ray if he's ever had a brother. Ray says no. Pete says me neither before wrapping an arm around him and asking Ray if he wants to walk with him for a while. Ray says yeah, and they play around, and it's also beautiful and wonderful and most importantly, hopeful. When evaluating these scenes side by side, we can better see just how different the movie is from the book, but I think that even more than that, we can see how altered Pete and Ray's relationship is. Don't get me wrong. It's really complex and interesting to evaluate in the novel, but a large part of that is because of the internal exposition that we get from Ray. In this format, where everything is externalized and characterizations have been changed, we get scenes and terminology that are non-existent in the book in order to truly build their bond. I mean, the care that they have for each other is clear throughout this scene. Pete, even though he just met Ray, is determined to convince Ray not to go down a path that would yield nothing but more pain, which, oh, the irony. He does this by emphasizing their friendship and calling it beautiful. He He refers to them as an us, which is genuinely striking when you consider the fact that, again, they've known each other for like 3 days. Later on, he refers to the pair of them as brothers, and well, that's interesting. Obviously, this whole video is about the queerness of these two, so the label brother doesn't quite fit the bill in that sense, but I understand the intention behind it. But who better to elucidate that understanding than the screenwriter himself, J.T. Molnar?
Anything regarding, whatever they're feeling for each other on one level, transcends gender, sexuality, everything. Like, and there's moments where you could read one thing into it and another moment where they're talking about how they're brothers. And so I think that the central love story between those two characters is so important. And we knew the movie would not work if their connection didn't work.
This is everything. This entire interview is actually really interesting, and if you want to know more about the adaptation side of the movie or just how Molnar went about bringing the complexity of Ray and Pete's relationship to the screen, you should check it out. It'll be in the description. For the record, the word brother isn't uttered once between Ray and Pete in the book. It's only ever used when people talk about their biological brothers. So I think it's really interesting that it's used in 3 separate situations in this film. In fact, it's used for the last 3 of the big events that I talk about. Because listen, for viewers who didn't see the romantic connotation of their relationship, that label works. It's simple and to the point. But for people who do see the romantic connotation of Ray and Pete's relationship and the larger, more nebulous state of their feelings towards each other, you could argue that they use the word brother because they don't have the right word to say what they actually feel, or rather, they can't use the right word for it given the circumstances that they found each other in. But per Molnar's point, while these two ebb and flow between relationship dynamics, there's an undeniable fact that they've built a bond that goes beyond just plain old friendship. When doing research for this video, I found an interesting article where Vietnam veterans talked about the relationship they formed under extreme and harsh conditions, and this one stuck out to me. Michael D. Clark served as an operating room technician in Vietnam from 1970 to 1971. He describes how he and his fellow soldiers supported each other through many of the challenges of taking care of wounded soldiers by saying, "I have 3 guys that I consider brothers from Vietnam, and when you're in that depth of depression, the word would go out and we would know not to leave that guy alone for a while. Someone had to be with him." And you open your deepest, darkest parts of your soul and you get to know each other like you can't know anybody else. I can't be as honest and open with my wife, my family, anyone as much as I was with these guys, and they would open up with you, and I call it that we became connected at the soul. I mean, we almost became a part of each other. It almost feels silly using a real person's words and relationships and memories when dissecting this fictional one, but keeping in mind that King wrote this as an unconscious allegory for the Vietnam War, I don't think that it's far-fetched to say that he attempted to translate the bonds that were formed during that time into his own story. By the end of it all, Ray is begging his friends to keep walking even though it's futile. They're all going through an experience so singular that it unifies them in a truly unimaginable way. And when it comes to Ray and Pete, their relationship is layered with all of that, but also more. What that more is up to our interpretation. There's a review that I read that sums this up perfectly to me. Hoffman and Johnson's performances are a nod to the sometimes fluid intersections of love and friendship within the male coming-of-age experience, painted for the audience through life-saving embraces, conversations laced with natural chemistry, and glances that linger slightly too long. Y'all know that post is like, not friends, not lovers, but a secret third thing? Yeah, that's them in a nutshell. The walk continues on, and the gruesome deaths continue, which visibly wears everyone down even more. Olsen's death is particularly awful, and the fact that it's toned down for the movie is insane. I took to carving out time to read the book during meals before the movie came out, and I just remember putting my fork down when Olsen died, because I was like, oh wow. The score for this scene is also an all-timer, like the synth swelling into the orchestra. Chills, y'all. Chills. After his death, the remaining walkers find out that Olsen had a wife named Clementine and make a vow that whoever wins will make sure that she's taken care of. Barkovich starts losing it because he's not involved in the vow, and Ray tries to placate him, but it's useless. The guilt from getting Rank killed earlier on in the film is still eating at him, and Barkovich kills himself. It leaves Parker, Baker, Ray, Pete, and Stebbins as they get closer to Freeport. If you've been any sort of interested in the dynamic between Pete and Ray prior to this video, or even if you just read the book, there's a good chance that you've seen this line. It's blunt and shocking to both Ray and the audience when it happens, and some would argue that it's a definitive flagship moment of their relationship. So why is it completely left out of the movie, you ask? Great question. To understand the totality of that line and its exclusion from the film, we need to analyze the build-up to Freeport, the place where Ray sees his mother and girlfriend in the book. The script, movie, and book all have different approaches to this scene, so I'm going to speak about them in kind of a triangular-ish fashion. Just bear with me. They all start the same for the most part, with Ray talking to Collie about being homesick. They have their exchange about Ray at least being able to see his mom, while Collie won't see any family between now and the end. Pete jumps in to say that seeing his mom might make things worse for Ray, and Collie Parker calls him crazy and leaves. That's where the similarities between the screenplay, movie, and book end. From there, they all branch off. In the film, after Collie leaves, Ray and Pete have this exchange.
You really think it's gonna be harder?
I just want you to keep on walking.
That's it. And they're in Freeport. It's a touching scene. It's simple and it reaffirms the strength of this relationship that they built. There's some codependency to them, in my opinion, especially towards the end. And I think that even though Pete's been the one saving Ray throughout, we start to see both of them struggle with the idea of being without the other. The ending definitely demonstrates that, but let me not jump the gun. The script aligns more with the novel, which I'm saving for last because it's a lot. Here, after Collie leaves, Ray questions what Collie's issue is, and Pete replies with, he thinks we're queer for each other. Ray's shocked by it, but Pete continues on, saying that maybe Collie's even half right. Ray's bewildered. Pete gets pissed off by his bewilderment, calls him self-righteous, and says that he's not even going to tell Ray if he meant it as a joke before storming off. It's interesting. And I'll come back to it after we talk about the book, because the point I have to make relies on the context of the novel. Now for the novel. Oh, Stephen King. Oh, Stephen King. In the book, this scene is literally like 3 pages out of 20 that directly build up to Freeport, and so much happens in that span of time. So after Collie calls him crazy and walks away, the following exchange occurs. He thinks we're queer for each other, McVree said, amused. He what? Garrity's head snapped up. He's not such a bad guy, McVree said thoughtfully. He cocked a humorous eye at Garrity. Maybe he's even half right. Maybe that's why I saved your ass. Maybe I'm queer for you. With a face like mine? I thought you perverts like the willowy type. Still, he was suddenly uneasy. Suddenly, shockingly, McVree said, would you let me jerk you off? Garrity hissed in a breath. What the hell? Oh, shut up, McVree said crossly. Where do you get off with all this self-righteous shit? I'm not even going to make it any easier by letting you know if I'm joking. What say? Garrity felt a sticky dryness in his throat. The thing was, he wanted to be touched. Queer, not queer, that didn't seem to matter now that they were all busy dying. All that mattered was McVree's. He didn't want McVree's to touch him. Not that way. Well, I suppose you did save my life. Garrity let it hang. McVree's laughed. I'm supposed to feel like a heel because you owe me something and I'm taking advantage? Is that it? Do what you want, Garrity said shortly, but quit playing games. Does that mean yes? Whatever you want, Garrity yelled. Whatever you goddamn want. McVree's laughed again. You're all right, Ray. Never doubt it. He clapped Garrity's shoulder and dropped back. Garrity stared after him, mystified. The implications of this scene are actually insane. We're going to loop back around to this too, but one of the main things here is Garrity's consideration of Pete's offer. It's strange because he can say no. He's a quite headstrong person as we see throughout the novel, but he just doesn't. This line, queer, not queer, that didn't seem to matter now that they were all busy dying, in conjunction with but he didn't want McVree's to touch him, not in that way, is especially interesting. It could just end at he didn't want McVree's to touch him, but he adds not in that way, and it brings his crisis back into focus. It suggests that perhaps in some capacity he'd want Pete to touch him without the guilt-forward pretense, or maybe under different circumstances, or, well, like he said, in a different way. I just want to say that so much happens in addition to this, but it's very dense and would add a cute 15 minutes to this video, so I'll be brief adjacent. As they move closer to Freeport, Pete's words torment Ray so much that he starts lashing out at Barkovich and asks him, do you want to touch me too? Before immediately regretting it. Barkovich kills himself shortly after, and then Stebbins starts goading Garrity with a bunch of stuff about him being in love with his mom and maybe a little queer or having a touch of the lavender, which causes Ray to get pissed and storm off. Ray then tries to spill his guts to Pete about what happened between him and Jimmy Owens when they were 5, which Pete stops because Ray's literally on the verge of a breakdown. All of that, mind you, started because of the he thinks we're queer for each other line. And it all happens over the span of 20 pages. Ray Garrity sexuality crisis speedrun, genuinely. Once we're in Freeport, the movie, novel, and screenplay align again for the most part. Ray's girlfriend is present in the book, but Pete saving Ray remains the same. He keeps Ray from getting his ticket and drags him along. It's a devastating scene, and Judy Greer acts her flocking face off and her tiny bit of screen time, so brava, Miss Diva, you ate that. But the moments following are actually where comparing the novel to the movie / script gets finicky because the order of things is rearranged. In the movie, After Pete's pulled Ray back onto the road, Ray is understandably a mess. He's hit with the realization that he's doing the same thing that his father did, and he regrets his decision to join the walk. In order to try and pull Ray out of his spiral, Pete tells him about his scar and how he got it from a guy that he got into a fight with. He also offers up some backstory of how he grew up. Pete became an orphan after his parents died in the Great War. He lived everywhere and went through terrible and abusive living situations. He said he made a living picking fights and stealing shit, and he said that it wasn't until after he was sliced with a hunting knife during a fight that he realized he needed to make a change. The experience made Pete want to find the good in the bad, the light in the dark, and that's what he intended to do with the prize. What follows is a really, really touching scene, and I mean, like, the whole monologue that David Johnson is doing here is beautiful, but his plea to Ray is one of my favorite moments in the movie just because it's so earnest. And I also love how Cooper Hoffman plays this scene because I don't think my brother blinks once. Like, this man is looking for a lifeline and he finds it in Pete, and I feel like I need to be sedated. So great.
Sure, I could have used Ray.
What?
The brother. Ray, listen to me. If you make this, I suggest you choose love. I suggest you take that prize and go home to your mom because Ray, you a good fucking kid. And you deserve it.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah.
He mentions the brother thing again, which my business associate JT Moner already put his 2 cents in on. It's weird though because I feel like this is one of those moments where brother genuinely does feel like a first word to come to mind kind of thing. Because I think what would have saved Pete was having someone, anyone that cared for him, that looked at him and saw someone worth saving and putting time into, not necessarily or specifically a brother. This feels like the word brother is being used loosely, almost in place of friend. The only difference that this scene has to the script is this line, Ray, I've gotten something out of this that I never thought I'd have. I could die happy. Is left out of the movie. And no! I'm so sick about it because it really does summarize why Pete's doing what he's doing. He's been looking for belonging for his entire life, and in a really, really messed up way, he found it with all the boys on the walk. Now, as for the book accurate reasoning behind Pete's scar, that whole story comes at a completely different, much earlier time in the novel, but under a similar circumstance. It comes after one of the walkers has been run over by a half-track and Ray's freaking out about it. Pete tells him about the scar as sort of a distraction, and it's revealed that he got it from his ex-girlfriend Priscilla, and that she's the reason that he joined the walk. I got into this long walk shit the same way that guys used to get into the Foreign Legion. In the words of the great rock and roll poet, I gave her my heart, she tore it apart, and who gives a fart? Her name was Priscilla, McGree said. About the scar. It was last summer. We both wanted to get away from home, away from our parents, and away from the smell of all that cow shit so the great romance could bloom in earnest. So we got jobs working for a pajama factory in New Jersey. We got separate apartments in Newark. My place was with 2 other guys, and there were 3 girls with Pris. We left on June 3rd in my car, and we stopped once around 3 in the afternoon at a motel and got rid of the virginity problem. I felt like a real crook. She didn't want to screw, but she wanted to please me. The next Monday, we started in the Plymouth sleepwear factory. Pris sewed on buttons from 7 till 3. I was on the 5th floor. I was a bagger. At first, the joy and bliss was Keatsville all the way. I screwed her 3 more times, all at the drive-in with the smell of cow shit coming in through the car window from the next pasture. The worst thing was that she was getting away from me, going beyond me. I loved her, I really did. I knew it, and I knew there was no way I could tell her anymore so she'd understand. I couldn't even screw it into her. There was always that smell of cow shit. The thing of it was, Garrity, the factory was on piecework. That means we got lousy wages, but a percentage for all we did over a certain minimum. I wasn't a very good bagger, and this did not endear me to the rest of the boys because I was fucking them up. Meanwhile, down in buttoning, Pris was keeping herself busy, and she was making plenty. So I got to find out how much fun it is to be in competition with the girl you want to marry. At the end of the week, I'd go home with a check for $64.40 and put some Cornhuskers lotion on my blisters. She was making something like $90 a week and stocking it away as fast as she could run to the bank. And when I suggested that we go someplace Dutch, you would have thought I suggested ritual murder. After a while, I stopped screwing her. I couldn't take her to my apartment. There are usually about 16 guys there drinking beer, and there were always people at her place. At least that's what she said. And I couldn't afford a motel room, and I wasn't going to suggest that we go Dutch on that, so it was just screwing in the backseat of the drive-in. And I could tell she was getting disgusted. And since I knew it, and since I started to hate her, even though I still loved her, I asked her to marry me. Right then. She started wriggling around, trying to put me off, but I made her come out with it. Yes or no? And it was no. Sure it was no. Pete, we can't afford it. What will my mom say, Pete? We have to wait. Pete this and Pete that, And all the time, the real reason was her money, the money she was making sewing on buttons. Well, you were damned unfair to ask her. Sure, I was unfair, McVree said savagely. I knew that, but I wanted to make her feel like a greedy, self-centered little bitch because she was making me feel like a failure. Only she didn't have to make me feel like a failure because I was a failure. I didn't have anything particular going for me except for a cock to stick in her, and she wouldn't even make me feel like a man by refusing that. I got into a fight, McVree said finally. He blacked both my eyes and told me I better take off or he'd break my arms as well. I turned my time in and told Pris that night that I'd quit. She understood. She said it was probably best. I told her I was going home and asked her to come. She said she couldn't. I said that she was nothing but a slave to her fucking buttons and that I'd wish I'd never seen her. I told her that she was a fool and an unfeeling bitch that couldn't see any further than the goddamn bank book she carried around in her purse. Nothing I said was fair, but there was some truth in all of it, I guess. Enough. We were at her apartment. That was the first time I'd ever been there when all of her roommates were out. They were out at the movies. I tried to take her to bed and she cut my face open with a letter opener. She cut me like I was trying to rape her. Like I was germs and that I'd infect her. I cried, McVree said. I cried like a baby. I got down on my knees and held her skirt and begged her to forgive me. She asked me why I'd done that to her, hurt her like that. She said I had no right. There I was, Ray, with my face cut wide open, and she's asking me why I hurt her. Yesterday morning, Pris was still very important to me. Now she's nothing. So that was a lot, and I felt like it was important to read most of that scene as it was written instead of just giving like a spark noted version, because a lot of it is Pete attempting to justify himself and his actions. He wants Ray to sympathize with his feelings of emasculation, his anger and cruelty towards Priscilla for not wanting him anymore. He knows that what he did was wrong, but even as he speaks about it, he attempts to victimize himself by saying, there I was with my face cut wide open and she's asking me why I hurt her. All the while knowing exactly what caused her to do that. Having to live with the shame alongside the physical manifestation of his supposed emasculation, his scar, is what drives him to the long walk. Though he's relatively kind to Ray, he's bitter, antagonistic, and nihilistic at many times throughout the book, to the point where Ray compares him to Barkovich, someone who literally baited another walker into being killed. So with that in mind, I'll circle back to the build-up to Freeport. After Pete leaves Ray reeling from his sexually forward comments, Ray asks Pearson, another walker, if he thinks Pete wants to be hurt. Pearson replies by saying, he ought to be wearing a beat me hard sign. I wonder what he's trying to make up for. And this is the attestation of Pete McVree's character. I think a lot of people misinterpret Pete's offer to jerk Ray off and him being half queer. I always see people being like, oh, he wants that cookie so bad. But immediately after that, Ray realizes that Pete's saying these things as a sort of provocation. I mean, I also think it's testing the waters to see if Ray might feel what he feels, but a lot of it's wrapped up in the idea of Pete inviting harm upon himself. Like he's literally suicidal. This blatant display of desire might be born out of want, sure, but it's also born out of him being suicidal. There's no way that Book Peter McVree's was ever going to win the long walk, not under the circumstances that he joined it in. He's not walking to win. He's walking out of shame. He's walking to run away from the harm that he inflicted upon another person. There is no way that he was ever going to win because he never wanted to in the first place. So, with that said, putting the Pete side by side is a real trip. Movie Pete McVree's is quite literally a great, fantastic, wonderful person. This is a weird aside, but I've watched so many reaction videos to this movie, and almost every single one there's some variation of Pete's such an angel or Pete's so wonderful. And well, yeah, the public is right. Peter McVree's is undeniably the glue that keeps everyone together in this movie. He forms the Musketeers, he saves Ray over and over, and he keeps an unfathomable amount of optimism stored within himself. David Johnson is wildly charismatic in this role. Like, you genuinely can't help but be drawn to him, and it's a testament to both how he's playing the role and how Pete's been adapted from the source material. Earlier, I mentioned that the fact that the he thinks we're queer for each other line is also in the script, and I think that it's ultimately the perfect choice to leave it out of the movie. These characters really just share a name, you know? Both backstories are different, both have different motivations for walking, the end result is different, so it wouldn't have made much sense at all for this Pete, selfless, trying to better himself, wants to do some good Pete McVree's, to share the same intent on provoking words as the tried to sexually assault his girlfriend, book accurate Pete McVree's. Okay. Pete spiel over. Continuing on now. As we get closer to the end of the film, Stebbin proposes that nobody can help anybody else anymore. Pete immediately gets defensive, but Ray says that Pete has to stop saving him. In the book, the opposite actually happens. Ray hesitates on agreeing because he feels like he owes Pete something for saving his life more than one time, while Pete immediately agrees to no more help. It's an interesting flip. Later on, Collie and Art die in scenes that I personally cry over every time I watch this movie, and we learn that Stebbins is the Major's son. We then make our way to the conclusion of the film. Other than the characterizations, the ending is undoubtedly the biggest change that the film makes. In the novel, Stebbins and Ray are the final two walkers, unlike in the movie where it's Pete and Ray. Straight up, the ending of the book is a sprint. Within the last 7 pages, Baker, Stebbins, and Pete all die. Like, Steven, let's slow down. My goodness. 3 pages from the end of the book, Pete stays true to what he said about sitting down when he gets tired enough, and he sits. Ray tries to haul him off the ground, but he can't, and he screams, "No, me, shoot me," when the soldiers point their carbines at Pete. Of course, they don't listen and instead drag Ray away as Pete is shot. Ray becomes filled with a strange, roaring kind of emptiness after it happens, and there's 2 notable things that happen here for me. The first is that we get absolutely no description of Pete's death. All we get is McBreeze opened his eyes and smiled again. The next instant, he was gone. Ray doesn't want to indulge in the grotesqueness of it all, of the death of his closest companion throughout the walk. With Olsen, with Baker, with Colley, we get pretty graphic details about their final moments, but here it's like a switch. On, then off. The second thing is what Stebbins says after Pete's killed. He says, if there are such things as souls, his is still close. You could catch up. Firstly, as I very, very briefly mentioned before, Book Stebbins and all of his oddities were so interesting to dissect. This is one of my favorite lines of the entire novel because it mixes genuine sentimentality and cruelty so well. Like, what a backhanded reassurance to give somebody. That line is what steels Ray's resolve to win the whole thing, though he knows that there's no such thing as winning, not really. Even before the final stretch of deaths in the book, he knows that he was never going home again. And yeah, after Stebbins drops to the ground and Ray wins, he's essentially lost himself, his mind, his sanity. The walk broke him, which, how could it not? The book ends with Ray running after a dark figure in the distance, not bothering with a prize or wish because he's too far gone. In the movie, Stebbins dies after stopping and demanding the soldiers to shoot him. Now, because Stebbins took on the illness of another walker from the book, Scram, his death here, in tandem with his monologue about being the rabbit, provides more closure than Stebbins' death in the novel to me, which is a change I actually really appreciate. That leaves Ray and Pete in this even more miserable situation because, no, it wouldn't have been easier or better for either one of them to have died earlier, but this, the decision that has to be made here, it's sickening. My one big gripe with this movie is the fact that I just wanted it to be longer. Like, we should have cleared 2 hours. I just really wanted 10 minutes of these two walking and trying to squeeze as much out of their time left together as they could. But that's just a me thing. The screenplay and film differentiate in curious ways, so neither of them align with the book's ending, which is a choice I personally enjoy. It makes sense to have the last 2 walkers be the ones that we've watched bond over the course of an hour and a half. Both the script and the film follow similar tracks in what actually happens. It's mainly the dialogue that differs. Pete still sits, though in the film he kneels, and that choice feels like a proposal of sorts. It's not inherently romantic, no, but it's inherently devout to the other. Pete's not sitting because he's tired, though I'm sure he is. He's sitting because he wants Ray to win. He tells Ray to go win it, and it's the ultimate sacrifice. In the movie, Pete says,
No, you gonna do this for your mom.
but in the script it's written as, do this for your dad, and I love the change. Ray picks Pete up despite his protests and forces him along, saying,
Being a brother to my brother. Come on.
brother motif, welcome back. It's what convinces Pete to keep walking before Ray himself falls behind. They've both racked up warnings, so when Ray stops, he gets gut shot. Pete's devastated, runs back to Ray, and holds on to him as Ray says this.
I can't see it, but you can. That's why I love you.
Ray!
I love you, Pete.
They pull Pete off of Ray. Ray apologizes to his mom and is killed by the Major. Pete has won the long walk. Before I get to the very, very end, we obviously have to unpack Ray's final words to Pete. The I love you bit is absent from the screenplay, actually, and I find that absolutely fascinating. Much like what I was saying about Ray's reaction to Pete during the You Got a Lady scene, the fact that this isn't in the published script, I have so many questions. I've been using the word nebulous to describe Ray and Pete's relationship because it is. It's hard to define, it ebbs and flows between platonic and romantic in that secret third thing, but love has never been a question. It's obvious that they love each other. They wouldn't have made it this far otherwise, but it being explicitly stated is such a blow to the chest. These are their last moments together. Like Ray says earlier on, he might as well speak while he can. The fact that Ray, the protagonist, is the one that ends up sacrificing himself for Pete, for love, is a change that works so well. The ending of the book literally left a pit in my stomach, but this left me feeling empty. I will admit that a small part of me was waiting for that Hunger Games 2 victors moment, but This world would never allow for something like that, no matter the circumstance. So, when Pete decides to ask for the carbine and fulfills Ray's wish of killing the Major, it's a role reversal. On the surface, the pair switch outlooks in the end. Ray chooses love while Pete chooses vengeance, and I'm very deliberately choosing the word vengeance instead of any antonym for love because Pete's choice isn't born out of hate. He chooses love too, his love for Ray. It's what changes his entire philosophy on life and ultimately changes his wish in the end. He, just like Ray, dies for the love that he has for his fellow walker, and maybe Stebbins' line from the book can still ring true. Maybe they can still catch up with each other. Throughout the press run for this movie, the cast and crew called Pete and Ray's relationship a love story. Francis Lawrence had this to say: "The whole thing is about the two of them bonding and kind of falling in love in a weird way. The conflict of what they're there for and what they've been through in the past only brings them closer together. The sacrifices they make for one another, to me, is the whole movie." J.T. Molnar said this: "At the core of Stephen King's story, it's a love story. It's a story about friendship and loyalty and love and going through life, meeting people, loving them, and losing them." And Cooper Hoffman put it plain and simple.
Ray loves Pete and Pete loves Ray, and that they are willing to sacrifice themselves throughout the story to keep them alive, to keep them in their lives.
This movie is about love. It's about life and death and fascism and war and brutality, but the core of it is love. Pete and Ray gave each other parts of themselves. They changed each other. They lost in the end, but man, look at how much they gained during those 5 days together. They found love, however you decide to interpret it, and isn't that a beautiful thing? Okay, technically that is the end of like the formal structured part of the essay. However, I have miscellaneous thoughts if you're curious. If you're not, thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you are staying, let's get into it. Okay, and also, I said the end of the structured part, so this part is a little more freewheeling. But boom, miscellaneous thoughts. Sexuality in the book versus the movie. My days. Everybody in the book is horny. They're teenage boys, so like, fair enough, but it's interesting that nearly every aspect of that is removed from the movie. I personally think that it's a good change because a lot of the sexuality is tied into Ray's internal monologuing and his own crisis, so I don't think that it would translate as well into a visual medium. Book Ray, he thinks about Jan a lot as a coping mechanism. Like, he thinks about her body and he thinks about her in a sexualized way often, and he says that he loves her, but at the same time he goes on the walk despite her protests. He makes out with another girl while there. He turned down her offer for them to have sex, and he has incessant thoughts about Jimmy Owens as he's walking, and oftentimes those thoughts get swept up in his feelings for Jan and how he contends with them. So it's like, okay, there's a moment actually that happens when a walker, this is a side note. Well, it's not a side note, it's another point. The crowd. I miss the crowd so bad in this movie just because it's like the element of having a whole bunch of walkers there. It's like that it was such an atmospheric aspect of the movie, and I understand why they didn't have that. Like, that would be a lot, but I just miss them. Like, I didn't get the watermelon man, and that was also an aspect of part like Ray and Pete's relationship, because when the watermelon man's like flinging out watermelons or whatever, Ray gets one and he eats half of it and gives the other half to Pete, which is crazy because, brother, do you really need to be rationing right now? But yeah, and then Ray, he sees somebody in the audience in another section of the book and he starts laughing hysterically, and like laughing so bad that he's doubling over and not walking, and Pete has to go back and drag him along. So it's like there are interesting aspects of the relationship that are tied to the crowd, but the most important one of like Ray's sexuality crisis is the moment with the blue balls, which, yeah, there's a moment in the book where a walker, he goes off into the crowd and he starts making out with this girl, and they start trying to get it on, and he's pulling his pants down, but he's getting warning after warning, and so he has to pull away, and he's in such pain from what he was not able to do that he gets his ticket. Like, he literally gets shot from it. But when it happens, before he gets shot, Ray gets aroused and he thinks about the humiliation about being caught with Jimmy and his love for Jan. And he says that the love for Jan that he has is all confused and mixed up with something else because he's also thinking about Jimmy. And like, yeah, that's really the whole, like, that's the whole thing. And it's quite literally like the thesis of what I was trying to say, but I had no idea how to work this part into my formal essay. The walk has forced him to confront all these memories. He's literally living out his mother's threat. Like, he's stripped bare. He's at his most vulnerable in front of all these people. And on top of that, he's having this crisis of sexuality. And it's really awful for him, genuinely. And that moment in the book with like the walker in the blue balls, it's really, I would say it's really important, but it's like, Amani, if it's really important, why don't you add it? But it's like, it's so abstract in the context of everything else that it was hard to talk about. But yeah. Now, like I said, in the movie, the sexuality stuff is basically gone. Ray doesn't kiss anybody. He doesn't kiss the girl with the sign like he does in the book. In fact, the girl in the movie is aged down, so it's very, very clear that absolutely nothing was going to happen there. The crowd is gone, so there's no interaction with anybody, not the walkers. There's a moment in the movie where, no, in the book. There's a moment in the book where Ray, he has to poop, and mind you, he has like a crippling fear of having to poop in front of all of these people. Because again, the vulnerability of all these people gawking at him while he's doing stuff. And there's a girl in the crowd that yells, "I see his stinky," and it's like genuinely public humiliation ritual. So there's none of that. But again, I don't think it's a bad change considering the fact that we can't see the full scope of Ray's feelings, his vulnerability, his humiliation, just because of the nature of the medium. No, Jimmy Owens is fine. Like, listen, they make up for it in other ways. But also, we have an entirely different character to contend with in Ray. Like, there's no girlfriend for him to feel guilty about, like, cheating on with a random person in the crowd. So I don't think it's that bad. Okay, the use of fruity and queer in the book and the movie. Queer is used a bunch of times in the book to denote male closeness. Like, it's actually used as a default to degrade a relationship. There are two brothers in the book, like actual blood brothers, who are selected for the walk, and they walk side by side until one of them is killed. And because of their constant closeness, a rumor spread that they were queer. Obviously, they weren't, but it provided insight into how these boys view any kind of physical proximity. Like, even in their dying days, they're like, we got to make sure that masculinity is protected and that we're walking alone, no matter how bad any of them were aching for comfort or companionship. And I think that the homophobia from the book, because there's quite a bit, is honed specifically into Barkovich's character, because it's not really present otherwise. He was calling everybody all kinds of pejoratives throughout, and even with the hill scene, we can see that he struck a nerve with Ray. But in the book, it's pretty, I don't know, I would say it's more casual amongst all of the walkers, and it shows that they all have like a real problem with their masculinity and also the idea of any kind of closeness, even in their dying days, which is really interesting. And then, okay, last thing. I feel like I'm sprinting. The proximity and physicality and how casting and chemistry played a role in that. I just appreciate the casting for this movie so very much. Top to bottom, the performances are so good. At the beginning of this video, I talked very briefly about Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson's chemistry, and I'm going to emphasize it again because so much of Ray and Pete's relationship hinges on how readily they acclimate to each other. In a matter of days, they became so physically comfortable with each other and in sync with one another's emotions. And us as audience members, we really feel that. It feels like these guys have fallen back into each other's lives even though they've never met before. And it's so beautiful to see. I love the scene. Okay, I love a lot of scenes, but I love the scene where Pete's egging Olsen on and Ray like taps his chest and motions for him to cool off because it's such a familiar act. I love when Pete nudges Ray out of frame and Ray gets an entire warning for it, but he doesn't even care because he's thinking about Pete's company instead of death and despair for once. I love how Pete cradles Ray in his last moments. Like, it's devastating and protective all at once. I love the moment with Barkovich when he's like tweaking out and like really grabbing on Ray, and Pete keeps looking over like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I love it. I love it when I'm going crazy. I love it when Ray breaks off from Barkovich and he grabs onto Pete's backpack handle. Like, I love the fact that these two are so in sync with each other, borderline codependent at this point, that it's like the idea of separation, even in a situation like this, is like anxiety inducing. Crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Okay, and then lastly, the sleeping on each other thing. In the book, they don't hate each other at all, but in the movie, they physically prop each other up. And the script, they do this like conga line type beat, which really, which really tickles me. But in the movie, they lean on each other like side by side, and I think it's a really powerful image, like literally holding each other up. So, yeah, ooh, that was a lot. Okay, I'm done. I swear. Thank you so much for watching this. If you watched this entire thing, like, and you're here with me right now, I appreciate you so much. Thank you to anybody that even clicked on this video to be like, what is this girl talking about? Thank you so much for giving me a chance. I'm done talking. This was the most self-indulgent thing I've ever put on this channel, but like, I literally have no regrets. This was such a ball for me. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Lionsgate, don't copyright strike me. Thank y'all for watching. Bye.